Imagine a world where a man's reputation was not measured by gold, not even by the lands he controlled, but by a code of honor that demanded loyalty, sacrifice, and unshakable courage. In the heart of medieval Europe, knights stood as both protectors and symbols of an age where steel and faith intertwined. But what if I told you that their legendary battles were only half the story, that beyond the clang of swords and the thunder of horses, a deeper code shaped not only the knight's life, but the very culture of the Middle Ages? This is the untold world of the medieval knight. Beyond the battlefield, where duty, devotion, and morality defined an ideal few could ever truly achieve. To understand the knight, we must first strip away the romance of shining armor and fair maidens. The knight's path began in boyhood. Sons of nobility were often sent away at the age of 7, becoming pages in another lord's household. Here they learned the basics of etiquette, literacy, and religion, yes, but also the art of service. They waited at tables, tended horses, and carried messages. Humble tasks, yet each was designed to instill obedience and discipline. At 14, the boy became a squire, shadowing a knight and absorbing the secrets of combat. Only after years of training, after proving courage in tournaments or on the battlefield, did he kneel to receive the tap of a sword on his shoulder, rising as a knight bound to an oath far greater than himself. This oath, known as chivalry, was more than a set of battlefield rules. It was a moral compass, a promise to defend the weak, uphold the faith, and serve one's lord with absolute loyalty. But here lies the paradox. Knights were warriors by trade, men whose livelihoods depended on violence, yet their identity demanded mercy, humility, and honor. How could men who lived by the sword also live by virtue? The answer lies in the duality of their world. The medieval knight was a bridge between earth and heaven. On one hand, he was a brutal fighter, hardened by the bloody chaos of medieval war. On the other, he was expected to embody Christian ideals: charity, protection of widows and orphans, and reverence for God. The church sought to temper his violence, introducing ideas like the peace of God and the truce of God, decrees that limited who could be harmed and when war could be waged. These were not mere rules. They were attempts to civilize the most dangerous men of the age, to channel their aggression into something sacred. But knights were not only bound to faith, they were bound to their lords, often caught in webs of feudal loyalty that tested their morality. A knight's word was his bond, and betrayal of that oath was unthinkable. If a knight swore fealty, he was expected to fight, bleed, and even die without hesitation. Yet the reality was not so simple. In a world of shifting alliances and political intrigue, knights often faced impossible choices. Loyalty to one lord could mean treachery to another, and survival sometimes demanded compromise. Beyond their feudal duties, knights lived under a cultural ideal shaped by the notion of courtly love. Songs of troubadours and tales of Arthurian legends painted the knight not only as a warrior but as a lover, devoted to a lady whose favor inspired his valor. This was not mere romance, it was an ethic of refinement, a counterbalance to brutality, encouraging knights to cultivate poetry, music, and manners. While real knights rarely lived up to such ideals, the stories mattered. They carved an image that inspired generations, influencing not only medieval society, but our very concept of heroism today. Life beyond the battlefield was not simply about serving lords or wooing ladies. Knights were also stewards of justice in their communities. They presided over disputes, protected trade routes, and maintained order in lands plagued by banditry. Their presence was meant to reassure peasants that law and order stood above chaos. Though in reality, knights themselves could become oppressors. Many abused their power, extorting wealth and terrorizing the very people they were sworn to protect. Here again, the knight's dual nature emerges. Guardian and tyrant, savior and scourge. Tournaments and jousts, often glamorized as sporting events, also carried a deeper meaning. For knights, these were stages where honor could be proven without the bloodshed of real war. To win a tournament was to gain prestige, to secure alliances, and sometimes even to attract wealthy patrons. Yet the risks were real. Armor could splinter, lances could pierce, and men could die in what was meant to be play. Still, these contests reinforced the knight's identity, blending skill, courage, and spectacle into a living theater of chivalry. The Crusades offered yet another dimension to the knight's code. To take the cross was to merge personal duty with divine mission. The knight became both soldier and pilgrim, journeying to the Holy Land in a war, sanctified by faith. For many, this was the ultimate expression of the chivalric ideal. A chance to fight not merely for a lord or a lady, but for God himself. Yet even the ideals collided with reality. Crusades often descended into brutality, and knights who pledged to defend the innocent could be found slaughtering entire cities. The contradiction between chivalric code and human action never fully disappeared. Over time, as gunpowder reshaped the battlefield and professional armies replaced feudal levies, the knight's role began to fade. By the late Middle Ages, the heavily armored horseman was no longer the decisive force he once was, but the code the chivalric ideal allowed lived the knight himself. Literature, art, and legend preserved the image of the gallant protector, inspiring Renaissance thinkers and even modern notions of military honor. In truth, knights were complex, flawed, often failing to live up to their lofty promises. Yet the code that guided them, however imperfectly followed, left a lasting imprint on Western culture. So, what remains when we peel back the layers of myth and history? The knight, beyond the battlefield, was more than just a fighter. He was a paradox. A man of violence called to live by peace, a servant of lords who also served God, a warrior shaped as much by ideals as by steel. His legacy is not in the battles won or castles built, but in the enduring human hunger for honor, loyalty, and meaning. And perhaps that is why, centuries later, we still look to the knight not just as a relic of the past, but as a symbol of the struggle between who we are and who we aspire to be.